Mm, mm, mm. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Okay, we left off midway through July 25th, 103 days to the election, and that's where we're going to pick up from. We're going to start from the bottom of page 55. As always, you do not have to have the book to follow along. That's why we're here. Netanyahu's hooded gaze and disengaged demeanor made it clear to me that he was running out the clock. He denied Gazans were starving and blamed Hamas for looting food. I interrupted to reiterate the need for an immediate ceasefire and a day after plan that gave Palestinians some kind of political horizon. Netanyahu wanted only a temporary ceasefire to get hostages back, but did not want to end the war. It was clear that nothing would be accomplished. We'd outlined the terms of negotiation for the ceasefire back in May and made frustratingly little progress with either Israel or Hamas. So all of y'all that jumped into the conversation and said that Kamala was the warmonger and that Kamala would keep things going, you didn't put into the equation a few things regarding Bibi from Philly. One, he's a staunch Zionist that used death and destruction to get to the place that he is in politically. Two, he's still on trial for war crimes while committing additional war crimes. And three, he knew that he could manipulate Trump. So he convinced you all through an incredible propaganda campaign to do the dirty work for him and get Trump elected. Even if you didn't outright vote for Trump, when you became a never Kamala and you engaged in lying to people, you made yourself a forever Trumper. Let us continue. Netanyahu was bent on undermining Joe Biden, one of Israel's staunchest allies. I had pleaded with Joe when he spoke publicly on this issue to extend the same empathy he showed to the suffering of Ukrainians, to the suffering of innocent Gazan civilians. But he couldn't do it. While he could compassionately state, I am a Zionist, his remarks about innocent Palestinians came off as inadequate and forced. A lot of you all aren't ready to hear this because you see yourself in Joseph Robinette Biden. You see your favorite uncle in Joseph Robinette Biden. You see your brother, your son, your husband in Joseph Robinette Biden. Joe Biden wants to stand on the right side of history. Joe Biden wants to believe that he's open-minded and that he is fervently going through a deconstruction journey, but he's not. From how he treated his own vice president to how his compassion is based upon complexion, Joseph Robinette Biden is a perfect example of someone who believes that they are anti-racist, but they are firmly comfortable in racism. Does that mean that these people cannot at times stand on the right side of history and accidentally do the right thing? Yes, because it is their desire to do the right thing, but until they actually start to deconstruct, they will never fully be there. The loyalty meant nothing to Netanyahu. He wanted Trump in the seat opposite him. Not Joe, not me. Netanyahu wanted the guy who would acquiesce to every extreme proposal for the future of Gaza's inhabitants and add his own plan for a land grab by his developer cronies. And what did Trump do? To try to impress Bibi from Philly, the first time he invited Bibi to Philly for the second Trump term to the White House, stated that he had plans to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Trump went on to share on Truth Social, where truth goes to die, an AI-generated video of such a thing occurring. For those of you all that became Never Kamala, aka Forever Trumpers, you knew what you were doing. You sold out everyone because you look at politics as if it's a video game, as if it's a Lifetime or Hallmark movie that when they say cut, everybody just gets up, takes a shower, and the blood is gone, and the bodies are resurrected. It was distressing to see how this issue was dividing Americans. 10,000 incidents of anti-Semitic harassment, vandalism, and more than 150 physical assaults. Now, Kamala, you pissing me off with this Zionism. The attacks were against Palestinian Americans. The attacks were against people who were perceived to be Palestinian. The attacks were against anyone with an inkling of melanin in their skin. No one was attacking Jewish students. Jewish students were just the ones that were placed on television. They were the ones on social media riding around in cars, claiming that they were so scared to go outside. They were the ones walking into protests, proclaiming themselves to be persecuted. Let's be honest in all things. All things. A 6-year-old Palestinian child stabbed to death, his mother wounded, by their own landlord in Illinois. Synagogues, temples, and Jewish community centers scrambling to protect themselves with new security measures. For what? For what? The only example you could give was that of a Palestinian child being stabbed, a child. Then you go on to say that synagogues and had to increase security for what? Because I remember a case that people were so quick to say was because of Hamas and the attack. And come to find out, that woman who was a rabbi was attacked by someone who had a crush. You won't learn from history, therefore we keep being Groundhog Dayed. And people continue to be lost. 3 Palestinian college students shot in Vermont, leaving 1 a paraplegic. Posters of Israeli hostages defaced and torn down from walls in New York City. Campus protests, some of which harassed and threatened Jewish students. No, they didn't. They harassed and threatened Palestinian students and those perceived to be Palestinian. It is amazing that we can give exact examples of Palestinians being targeted and harmed and almost losing their lives and being permanently disabled. And all we have regarding Zionist Israelis and Zionist Jewish people is talking points. I want you to keep that in mind. It's talking points. We of the Black community are constantly told that we have a victim mentality and we're constantly trying to victimize ourselves. But anytime somebody breathes wrong next to a Zionist Jewish individual, Lord Jesus, they are the most persecuted individuals ever. But yes, let's compare tearing down posters to someone being left a paraplegic. And created an atmosphere of tension and fear. These rising expressions of hate were chilling. What's chilling? What is chilling is the unfortunate habit that the United States has of shifting who the actual victim is at any given time in U.S. history. But one thing for certain, 2 things for sure, the people who reside within the borders of the United States know that until people see the victims as having white faces, they won't care. And it has to be a white face that they already liked beforehand. It has to be a white face spewing white things. Long before October 7th, Doug had become a leading voice in our administration combating anti-Semitism, speaking at the United Nations and representing the United States at Holocaust commemorations in Poland and Germany. Doug was proud of his Jewish heritage and its history of social justice. He was proud that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel had marched beside Dr. King. Doug worked to inspire and reinforce that pride in young Jews, taking the press with him to visit his old summer camp and talking to the kids there about celebrating their identity. He believed in the idea of Tikkun Olam, the obligation to repair the shattered world, small shard by small shard. We were the first family at the vice president's residence to have a mezuzah on the doorpost. The one we affixed came from a synagogue in Atlanta where Dr. King preached when it opened its doors to black worshipers after their church was burned by segregationalists. I'm going to need people to understand something and understand something firmly. You can be Jewish and be black. You can be Jewish and be black. Let us normalize not excluding black people from the intersectionalities that black people hold. And that includes black people excluding black people from intersectionalities. For any enduring peace, we have to let go of extreme rhetoric on both sides. There's not extreme rhetoric on both sides. Someone starts it, someone else has to return fire. Let's normalize saying shit for what it is. Let's normalize not constantly straddling the fence. Let us normalize politicians being able to speak freely and not straddle the fence in order just to gain power. Because if you're in it for the people, speak on what's best for the people. Stop all of this both sides are the same BS. This is why we keep losing. And by we, I'm talking about those that actually want to move forward towards equity. The one chazah is not a binary issue, but too often the conversation about it is. I wanted to acknowledge the complexity, nuance, and history of the region, but it seemed very few people have the appetite for that or the willingness to hold two tragic narratives in their mind at the same time, to grieve for human suffering both in Israeli and Palestinian. Because there aren't two tragic narratives. That's why nobody wanted to listen to you, Kamala. There aren't two tragic narratives. That's like saying, oh, as we grieve for the victims of Jeffrey Dahmer, we should cry for him too. That's two tragedies. Although the victims didn't do anything to Jeffrey but exist, we must cry for him because he wouldn't have gotten there if it wasn't for two tragedies. Loud voices on either side claimed there were no innocents on the other, a position I found inhuman. The inhuman part is to say that there were victims on the Israeli side. Time after time after time again, throughout the entire history of Israel becoming a thing because of countries outside of Palestine, of that area, determining who was supposed to be there, allowing the same culture and the same methodology that caused the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, the Americas, to be displaced, to be disrespected, to be genocided. It is the same thing. That's why they're calling Israelis now settlers. And I know Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who was tirelessly hauling himself from Jerusalem to Doha to D.C., sincerely wanted to end the suffering on all sides. Where's the suffering on all sides? Tazi Farms remembers a young lady was able to be held captive with her dog. When Hamas was releasing captives, they were fed, they were rested, they weren't emaciated. They thanked and hugged their captors. They said that they would miss them. And then they were forbidden from giving interviews or being interviewed to discuss what they experienced. We don't know firsthand experiences of those held hostage by Israel because they were returned in body bags, in graves. So tell me again. Right from the beginning of the campaign, protesters who thought we hadn't done enough for Gazans tried to disrupt my rallies. And this is where the issue is. If you have an issue, excuse me. Oof, let's get some water. If you have an issue with how an administration is handling things, and we're in the process of watching the race for POTUS Mountain, okay, but go to all candidates involved. Protest all candidates involved to let everybody know that you mean business, that whoever makes it into the Oval behind the Resolute desk or one of the other 7 that they can choose from, let them know that humanitarianism is top of your list. Why go after just one candidate? That lets me know that it wasn't about a genocide. You decided you wanted to play fast and loose with the lives of people. And those that did that, who knows your name today? Did you get that contract? Are you in that major motion picture? Because there were a lot of aspiring actors that jumped on board. How's that music contract working out for you? Did you get that promotion? Did you get a job in the White House? Are you now a staffer? I was born amid dissent. Civil rights were won through protest. My parents took me to demonstrations when I was still in my stroller. The people at my rallies had every right to do what they were doing. I understood them. I understood why they were angry. Did you fully? Did you? Did you come on? Usually the crowd drowned them out, and I went on with the business of my speech. But at a rally in Detroit, as I was detailing Trump's threats to climate policy and the Affordable Care Act, a noisy group chanted, "Kamala, Kamala, you can't hide. We won't vote for genocide." The threat to withhold their vote got to me. It felt reckless. Either Trump or I would be elected. The issue was not binary, but the outcome of this election certainly was. And for the amount of people who decided then and are already talking ahead of the next race to POTUS Mountain saying, oh, we're done. We're just going to let them have the country. We're not going to vote. What good does that do? What good does that do? That's like being upset that your landlord couldn't come to fix a pipe quick enough. So you're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just not going to pay rent anymore. And then you're out on the street. And then you want to complain about everything else going on. Since when does change occur from giving up? I'll wait. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking. Why weren't they protesting at Trump rallies? I wondered. I wished they would understand that sitting out the election or voting for a third candidate would elect Trump and kill any effort for just peace, any hope for a two-state solution. People realize that. People realize this, okay? Because they have no problem with understanding that we are a two-party majority country on the federal level. They don't demand of third parties to continue their grassroots movements and to tell them to stop just popping out every 4 years like cicadas. Because you have a plethora of political parties within the United States, and they're all through local, county, state, everything legislature. People understand that they're throwing their votes away. They vote third party. Or they convince you to vote a certain way knowing they didn't even register, because once again, what reigns supreme in the United States is the art of looking and trying to feel like the moral superior, by helping to keep everybody an unwilling crab in a bucket. And let's be real about that analogy, because when you put crabs in a bucket or anything in a bucket, there are those that try to escape and there are those that pull you back down. See, every crab isn't trying to pull folks down. It's those that look at somebody and go, why can't that be me? Maybe because you put all your energy and effort into being a naysayer, into being a contrarian, because you think that makes you edgy. You think that that makes you not like other girls, not like other guys. But really, it makes you no different than anyone else. Piss poor and lazy. And needing company and suffering. I wrapped up that unproductive meeting with Netanyahu in under an hour and walked out to address the press. I sincerely reaffirmed my commitment to Israel's right to defend itself. Against what? Against what? What is Israel defending itself against? The plethora of laws that it has against Palestinians? Telling Palestinians that they can work in Israel only certain times and only in certain positions. Telling Palestinians what streets they can walk on and where they can't. Telling Palestinians that if an Israeli settler wants their land, they can come on and take it. That they can be target practice for an Israeli. What are they defending themselves against? Anyone. I added that how Israel did that mattered. If I walk up unprovoked and slap the shit out of you, how would you feel if somebody said, wait a minute, Taz has the right to defend herself? I said that Hamas triggered the war when it massacred 1,200 innocent people and committed horrific acts of sexual violence. I listed by name the 5 American hostages still living and the 3 whose remains were still held by Hamas. Okay. This is a talking point that continuously gets used. How do they know that the people are dead if they don't have them? Number 1. Number 2, we're going to ignore all of the other attacks from Israel on Palestine, including the one just a few months before the October one in April. We're going to ignore the long-standing history since 1948 and before. We're going to ignore it coming out that the sexual aggression and the violence was from the IDF and the IOF. We're going to ignore that October 7th was perpetrated by Israel and confirmed to be perpetrated by Israel, right? Okay. And we're going to ignore all of the propaganda that is intentionally geared towards people living in the United States. Because there are whole programs to help Jewish people from the United States assimilate into life in Israel. So their predominant language is not English. So boxes wouldn't have English words on them. Textbooks wouldn't be English. And if they have all this intel, why haven't they rescued their own? And why isn't Israel itself making a push to release people? We have to break the chains of Zionism. Then I told the press that I had discussed with the Prime Minister the dire situation of innocent civilians in Gaza. I described the agonizing images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. I said, we cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent. I described our discussions on the proposed ceasefire. Once again, all of the examples that we can talk about and we can confirm are Palestinians suffering. Palestinians being persecuted, displaced. Running headfirst into the point and just going, oh, I love it. Can I have some more? To everyone who has been calling for a ceasefire, and to everyone who yearns for peace, I see you and I hear you. Let's get the deal done. But did you see them? Did you hear them? Or were you too steeped in Zionism because you didn't study the tenets yourself? July 26, 102 days to the election. My days now started with a 15-minute briefing on how the campaign was landing in the news. But the big news of the day for my campaign wasn't news to me. Barack and Michelle Obama had decided the time was right to endorse me. They wanted to make a film of them calling me, and it was now up on social media. Netanyahu had flown down to Mar-a-Lago to see Trump. Just fuck the Logan Act, huh? I learned that he was enraged by my remarks after our meeting. Well, of course, Israel invests a whole lot of money in the United States to make sure the United States is firmly indoctrinated into Zionism. Which is weird because for Zionism to work, allies are going to have to wipe out allies. Like the Christians can't, or the Jewish can't, but you know, why worry about those pesky little details, right? The briefing digressed to note that Trump had stopped wearing the bandage on his ear almost 2 weeks after the bullet had nicked it. Then there was a second briefing with my staffers, Dean Lieberman and Ernie Apreza. Dean, a deputy national security advisor and skilled strategist, would update on international events, and Ernie, my press secretary, on domestic news. There was a note before the next item on my schedule. Hold for hearty breakfast. It's a reality of campaign life that a grown woman needs to be reminded to make time to eat. But what followed would be a day of almost back-to-back calls with little pause for refueling. There would be a DNC Finance Committee call with good news about the scale of donations, large and small, that were continuing to pour in. There was a call in the Faith Coalition hosted by my pastor, Reverend Brown, and we had to keep moving on the search for the person who would join my ticket. I had to find a vice presidential candidate, and I had to find one fast. From the day I got Joe's call, I had 16 days to do it, and now I had exactly 11 left. When Joe picked me, he'd taken over 9 weeks to thoroughly consider all his options. My deadline was August 6th, a day after the roll call that would formally nominate me. Ohio's ballot had an August 7th closing date, and they needed 2 names to print on the ballot. It was an excruciatingly tight time frame. My choice would impact not just the race, but also the shape of my administration. Do I believe that Joe Biden just gave himself 9 weeks to choose Kamala Harris? No. Joseph Robinette Biden had been a career politician, decades in politics, before he said to the public that he would choose a black woman as VP and anything. He knew who he was choosing. He may have drug it out for dramatic effect. It made good theater. Good political theater, darling. It did, yes. But do I think someone so steeped in politics just took 9 weeks to make a choice? No. Plus, he knew that eventually, whether it was this election or the next, Kamala would be his successor. And he needed someone that had the look and the connections to carry on his legacy. Politics, especially with white men, is about legacy. Who's going to carry it on and who could plausibly outshine it or redact it. Being a vice presidential pick is an enormous gift, vaulting someone who might have local or state recognition into the bigger, brighter national stage. But it can also mean taking a job that, as FDR's VP, John Nance Garner, so memorably said, may not be worth a bucket of warm piss. Jimmy Carter, y'all know Jimmy Earl. We like Jimmy Earl around here. Having lived through the assassination of JFK and the resignation of Nixon, knew that the vice president had to be ready to take over. He remade the role. His vice president, Walter Mondale, was the first to have an office in the West Wing. Ronald Reagan also understood that the vice president needed to be prepared, as did Bill Clinton. George W. Bush went further, ceding unprecedented power to Dick Cheney. That's because everybody was afraid of Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney shot a friend. Like he pulled a Remy Ma before Remy Ma pulled a Remy Ma. Like that really wasn't preparedness. That was survival. But it remains true that the vice president's role will be as little or as much as the sitting president desires. That can be a hard pill to swallow. A couple of likely candidates, such as Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer and North Carolina's Roy Cooper, would preemptively withdraw from contention. We'd put a poll in the field to determine who among the other possibilities had name recognition and of those who have the kinds of positives and negatives that might help or hurt us. The results turned out to be useless. None of the names moved the needle either way. So that put the onus on what would turn up during vetting and what my personal chemistry with each candidate was. I wanted someone who shared my vision and had the practical chops to implement our plans. And this is the sad state that U.S. politics are in. Instead of being able to choose someone with a track record of doing what's best for the populace, we have to treat it like a fucking matchmaker show. Because far too many people in the United States do not care about helping one another. It's who's popular. Politics should have never become a popularity contest. But here we are. Oops. We narrowed it down to 8 possible candidates and asked them to submit material such as financial disclosures, ads from previous political campaigns, and information about their personal lives that might not yet have found its way into the public record. Yeah, because we know JD put it in the pullout, hid a lot. Till he hit the campaign trail. Whew. With Cantankerous Cankosaurus Rex. And now we all wish we knew less about him. So much less. So much less. My vetting team was led by Jen O'Malley Dillon, my campaign chief of staff, Sheila Nix, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and former White House counsel Dana Remus. There's a reason we had top cops and lawyers on the team. It's a prosecutorial process. As I learned 4 years earlier when I sat across a table from the lawyer vetting me. The final stage, after the investigation, was an interrogation that lasted 9 hours. The attorney took every aspect of my past, especially the sensitive or difficult moments, and pressed me on them. Not because she didn't know the answers, but to see how I would handle the pressure. Did I get my back up? Could I pivot? Would my answers pass the smell test? She would periodically ask me if I wanted to take a break. I declined. We didn't get up from the table until she had fine-tooth combed my entire life. Which is interesting because so many voters claim that they want a politician, representatives that mirror their lives, that want someone, that comes in and, is about the working class, is about the mothers, the fathers, the things like that. But they want to scrutinize and act as if the politicians are supposed to be above reproach when they don't like them, and they're supposed to be perfect when they don't like them. But when they do like them, they can be as flawed as a felon. What isn't happening, and why are you attempting to refer to me as Esther? Because you're showing that you weren't able to comprehend what I just said. So you wanted attention, I'm giving it to you. What ain't happening, Rog? Did your fingers cramp? Oh, we're going to continue to have government shutdowns because they haven't been able to just truly offer a budget. Trump won, cry more. Who's discussing Trump? Who's discussing the election? We're going over a book. Why would I cry over a politician? They're under my employment. So once again, what ain't happening, Rog? And why are you poorly attempting to refer to me as Esther? Are you aware of the story of Esther? Because I am not the one scouring the app to pop into people's lives in order to be a piss poor troll who just made it to the number 3 gifter badge in my life. Whew, okay. Let's put a pin in this real quick because Stupid has entered the chat. And to my... Don't boot him yet, Jess. Don't boot him yet. Here's the thing. I didn't say this wasn't political. I said I wasn't discussing Trump. And you're calling an educated black woman a laughing hyena. Why? Because somebody told you that's what to say? I said we're going over a book. And yes, I do stop in all of my series regarding books, literature. The series is called Learning Through Black Literature. So I bring in nuance, context, and history, and I make corrections because people are flawed and people will write in order to put out what they want to put out to be viewed a certain way. Now, Rob, just because you are menial betwixt your ears and behind your eyes does not mean that you get to come in here and make your lack of comprehension my problem. Now, if you don't understand something, feel free to ask that it be explained to you. But if I were you, stop embarrassing your ancestors. They created all of these systems for you to flourish with being mediocre, and you haven't even met the bar of mediocrity. You think that black women aren't educated? Funny, because we are the most educated demographic. But you are showing that you have a kink for being embarrassed, and that you have no problem letting the forever World Wide Web know that you haven't even made it to a second grade level of anything. Now, do you want to continue, or do you want to save the little bit, and I mean very little, bit of self-respect you have left? Last week, I was not discussing pyramids, but you do realize that the black diaspora is made up of more than just black women. And which pyramids are you discussing? Because there are a multitude of communities that built pyramids. But what do pyramids have to do with the discussion at hand? I see you're just going to keep picking up the goalpost until you think you're going to have a gotcha moment. But you won't, because one of us is smart and the other one is you. Okay. Are there any more talking points that you have memorized that you want to get out? That you think will get under my skin? That you think will eventually make you correct? Are there any more? Because your poor attempt at trying to disguise your lack of English comprehension as AAVE, that is laughable. There's no meds needed for that. The mediocrity of white men has no cure. The best that they can do is treat it with deconstruction, but not everybody was vaccinated well enough to be able to deconstruct. But at this point, I tire. I'm reading a book, and my name isn't Esther. Once again, do you know the story of Esther? And you act as if you're the only person in here. Rog, you need someone to talk to. But we're going to go back to the book. We'll see if you can comprehend. Let him stay, mods. Let him stay. Let him tire himself out. He wanted the spotlight? We'll give it to him. We'll let the gallery speak to him. But it remains true that the vice president's role will be as little or as much as the sitting president desires. That can be a hard pill to swallow. A couple of likely candidates, such as Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer and North Carolina's Roy Cooper, would preemptively withdraw from contention. We'd put a poll in the field to determine who among the other possibilities had name recognition of those who had the kinds of positives and negatives that might help or hurt us. The results turned out to be useless. None of the names moved the needle either way. So that put the onus on what would turn up during vetting and what my personal chemistry with each candidate was like. I wanted someone who shared my vision and had the practical chops to implement the plans. Biden had won the nomination because Congressman Jim Clyburn, leader of the Congressional Black Caucus, had thrown his support behind him. The black vote in the South Carolina primary, especially black women's vote, had thrust him to victory. The pressure was on him to pick a black woman running mate. The press knew I was on the short list, so they had our D.C. apartment building staked out. When Doug and I stepped out to go somewhere, they'd follow. Occasionally, I'd save them the trouble. I'd wander over to their van and say, "Doug and I are just going for coffee. Can I bring you something?" Getting to my interview with Joe was choreographed like a spy movie, Andy Vargas, my body person, drove me and our Audi to a strip mall where I switched to an SUV and was instructed to duck as we approached a big house in Northern Virginia. I was led downstairs to the bottom level to a room with closed drapes where Jill and Joe would meet me. It was the height of COVID, so we were all wearing masks. Once you were chosen as VP candidate, you barely have time to blink before your life becomes unrecognizable. Prior to getting the call from Joe to tell me he had picked me, I'd been visited by a friend, Carol, who has a remarkable garden. She wanted to give me a box of her late-season tomatoes. I was feeling stressed, knowing that Joe was about to decide and that the world was watching. When I'm stressed, I like to cook. I greeted Carol in the lobby of my apartment building, both masked and carrying the box back upstairs, rolling up my sleeves to make a big batch of marinara for the freezer. I never made that sauce. Right after Joe's call at 2 p.m., cars started pulling up on the street outside, spilling out national campaign staffers with briefing books on every aspect of the campaign. I took the binders and gave each staffer a handful of ripe tomatoes in return. I hate wasting food. And now, I was about to cause the same sudden swerve in someone else's life. Of the 8 names on the list for vetting, I might as well say that Pete Buttigieg was my first choice. Harvard grad, multilingual, Rhodes Scholar, business consultant, naval intelligence officer, twice elected Midwestern mayor, cabinet secretary, loving husband and father. He was well qualified in so many respects. I love Pete. I love working with Pete. He and his husband, Chasten, are friends. He is a sincere public servant with the rare talent of being able to frame liberal arguments in a way that makes it possible for conservatives to hear them. He knows the importance of taking our case to people who aren't usually exposed to it and is magnificent at sparring with opponents on Fox News. He would have been an ideal partner if I were a straight white man. But we were already asking a lot of America to accept a woman black woman married to a Jewish man. Part of me wanted to say, screw it, let's just do it. But knowing what was at stake, it was too big of a risk. And I think Pete also knew that. To our mutual sadness. 2 pages of what? Both blank. Her whole life, she has been Indian and black. Intersectionality exists. It's amazing that the people from the same community that love to come on and wave their 23andMe and tell us that 2% of Ethiopian and Nigerian that flows through their blood allows them to wear box braids and say the N-word. You all act as if multiracial individuals don't exist. But are you really mad at her for being Indian and black? Or are you still upset with Mother Nature that you were so easily defeated by UV rays? Oh, now it's blah, blah, blah. Really? Ask yourself this. Why did you come in here? If you didn't like the discussion and you don't agree with the subject matter, why are you here? And why are you upset that you're not ruffling me? Yes, Trump is making knee pads great again. Did you hear? He promoted a White House staffer with no prosecutorial experience that screwed up a case for him so bad that his sycophant judge, Eileen Cannon, had to have said individual recused from the case. Yes, and Laura Loomer loves to take to Twitter, aka X, and talk about giving Trump the best oral sex of his life. So yes, he is making knee pads great again. He's keeping them in business. No, Trump doesn't own my every thought, but as a black woman, I live rent-free in the ghetto that is your cranial cavity. That's why you're here. That's why you're upset that I'm not falling into the stereotype that you thought that I would. That you're not in here owning who you perceive to be a lib. I'm not the one venturing into places that I claim I don't like. If you don't care, why are you here hoping to invoke a response that you're not getting? If you don't care, why didn't you scroll past? Oh, you decided to see my live, click into the live, try to have a gotcha moment, fail, but your failure is for shits and giggles for yourself? What a miserable existence. Okay. July 27th, 101 days to the election. We were on Air Force Two en route to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, in the heart of the Berkshires. This was an event that had been planned with enthusiasm for the campaign was flagging. Now it was through the roof. We'd had a target to raise $400,000 at this event, but that had shot up to over $1.5 million. You're saying that you owned me, but you clicked into this live. You kept repeating the same thing until I acknowledged you. You threw out a racial trope, did not get the response that you wanted. Start typing in all caps, and you're trying to throw around what you think are trigger words, and you're still not getting the response that you want. You're clamoring for my attention. I owned you the moment that you saw me. You came to my house. I didn't come to yours. Thank God you guys are top of the ticket. We weren't going to make payroll, a senior campaign finance official on the plane confided to Sheila. Until that moment, my team had no idea how bad things had been. Yeah, just a little quick timeout. The streets were lined with people waving handmade signs saying, Madam President, and singing Woody Guthrie's anthem, This land is your land. One sign, Lotus for POTUS, might have confounded anyone who didn't know Sanskrit. It came from a meme posted by a 53-year-old South Asian pediatrician right after Biden endorsed me. In Sanskrit, Kamala means lotus. In America, Kamala means POTUS. Pittsfield is a city of 40,000, and despite its picturesque location in rolling, wooded hills, it struggles with many of the issues of small-town rural America, such as a stubbornly high poverty rate and opioid addiction. But in summer, an influx of affluent arts lovers drawn to the rich cultural offerings of nearby Tanglewood masks those realities. The event at the historic Colonial Theater had been planned as a fundraiser for the Biden Victory Fund, but had been quickly rebranded as the Harris Victory Fund. Solidly blue Massachusetts wasn't used to seeing the presidential candidate this close to the election when swing states generally get the lion's share of a candidate's time, and organizers half expected, now that I was top of the ticket, I'd send a surrogate. But I wanted to keep my commitment. Oh, you don't live in the ghetto? Are you trying to convince us or yourself? I don't care where you live. not at the right income level to ever live in my head or anywhere near it. The concert would feature A-list talents such as James Taylor and Yo-Yo Ma, both longtime Democratic supporters. The two Massachusetts senators were there, Elizabeth Warren, whom I'd come to know when fighting the big banks as California AG, and Ed Markey, whose wife, Rear Admiral Susan Blumenthal, had helped Doug find his way in the foreign land of the Senate spouse. It was a warm, familiar crowd, slightly on the older side, dotted with longtime supporters and friends who'd driven west from Boston and Martha's Vineyard as the campaign went on. The venues would get bigger and the crowds more diverse. Posses of young girls taking selfies, dads with their kids on their shoulders, tattooed teenagers ushering a grandma to a better vantage point, people of all ages, colors, wallet sizes, all standing shoulder to shoulder, being immensely kind to one another. I could feel the intensity of emotion, and my only thought, when glancing down at a tear-streaked face or grasping a hand on the rope line, there is so much at stake. I cannot fail these people. Now, that takes us up to July 28th. We'll do July 29th, and then we'll stop there for the day. And then you all know, same time, same place, we will meet up again. And as always, if you miss any part of this, it will be uploaded by tomorrow onto YouTube so you can catch up. If you missed parts 1 and 2, they are already loaded. July 28th, 100 days to the election. That Sunday, I hunkered down at the Vice President's residence to work on plans for the convention and to go over campaign strategy. Maya and Tony were staying with us. We worked on logistical plans for the large group of friends and family who would be attending the convention to support me. It's more than a notion how much planning needs to go into that. Where they will stay, where they'll eat, who will look after the elderly ones, how to get them to and from the convention site. Who will field the 101 questions they will have of me when I can't possibly take that call? National politics is one thing. Family politics can sometimes be just as gnarly. Maya, as always, took up the slack. The convention chair, Minion Moore, started her political career with Jesse Jackson's presidential run in 1984 and worked for both Clintons and as an advisor on the Biden-Harris transition in 2020. She'd been tasked with planning a showcase for Joe. But because she is a subtle and strategic thinker who sees 6 moves ahead, she had formed a group called the What If Committee to prepare for all kinds of contingencies, such as what would happen if the Republicans deposited hundreds of migrants from the border, as they had been doing in Chicago right at the convention door. The possibility that Joe might drop out also on the what if list, but rated significantly below, ensuring that the media narrative that this convention could be rerun of 1968 did not come to pass. Minion's task benefited in the end by the Biden team's failure to engage with her to nail down Joe's convention theme. She was free to order up graphics for my theme, for the people, for the future. For the program, we had to figure out what to keep and what to throw out from what had been planned for Joe. Some of it was a given. There are large procedural segments. There will always be elected officials and union leaders and some celebrities. Anyone running for office lobbies hard for a speaking slot in prime time. In this case, they would need to be slotted in before Joe Biden's speech on night 1, the vice presidential nominees on night 2, and my acceptance speech on the final night. Each of us would have friends and families speaking as our lead-ins. We needed to tell my story in the production, and one aspect I wanted to highlight was my work as AG. I think that the elected attorneys general are some of the most talented and dedicated officials in the country, and I wanted to throw the spotlight on them as well. The convention exists on two planes at the same time. It must work for the delegates in the hall, those committed community leaders from every state and every walk of life who live and breathe democratic policies, and also for the television audience who may have only just started to focus on the election as they deal with their daily responsibilities. I believe it is also in the party's interest to highlight our stars, while we make it as entertaining as possible. When I became VP, I had a secret project. I called it the Stars Project, that only my senior team knew about. We'd brainstorm about the younger talents in the party, and then on Friday afternoons, I'd invite one or another to visit my office in the West Wing or the residence. As I'd offer a seat on the couch across from me, more than one nervously confessed, "I feel like I've been called into the principal's office." I would laugh and say, "Now I think you're very talented. What are you working on? And how can I help you?" Many of those on my list spoke at the convention. Lauren Underwood, Robert Garcia, Angela Also Brooks, Latifah Simon, Maxwell Frost, Joe Neguse, Lena Hidalgo, Jasmine Crockett. Stephanie Cutter, a trusted advisor and veteran strategist, aided by Reggie Hudlin, my best friend Chrisette's award-winning filmmaker husband, had started pulling together the short biographical video usual for the vice president, but now that I was the top of the ticket, we had to scramble to find much more material. This video and my speech would be my introduction to the large numbers of people who had just tuned into the campaign and really didn't know who I was. I would finally have control of the podium to reclaim my narrative and my identity. Early that evening, I got a call from Joe. For months, I'd been working on delicate negotiations to bring home former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan and Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich from their unjust imprisonment in Russia. While attending the Munich Security Conference in February, I'd used the opportunity to arrange private meetings with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Slovenian Prime Minister Robert Golob. Germany had in custody the inmate of most value to Vladimir Putin, the assassin Vadim Krasikov, who had killed a Chechen separatist in Berlin. Slovenia had two other Russians of interest of Putin. Poland and Norway each had one. It was a chess game with many states' interest in play. Chancellor Scholz is a serious, thoughtful man who weighed his options carefully. As with all European heads of state, there was a heightened sense of the threat Putin represented. Eastern Europeans especially had experienced oppression under the kind of greater Russia that Putin romanticized and yearned to recreate. There was also a melancholy sense that the United States was not the ally it had once been. Trump's first term had proven that our leadership of NATO, the world's greatest military alliance, was not constant and might be fleeting. Their knowledge of what happened in the 1930s is far greater than what they perceive ours to be. They can feel it in their blood and in their bones, and they legitimately fear we might abandon them. When I say America is back, they would say, for how long? I always reassured them while silently praying that what I said would remain true. It was no small ask of Chancellor Scholz to release a murderer serving a life sentence, but he was motivated by the possibility of securing the release of Alexei Navalny, the leading opposition figure in Russia, who had been saved from Russian poisoning by German doctors before bravely returning to Russia, knowing he'd be imprisoned. Oops, hold on. There we go. A small team at the NSC and the Office of the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs at the State Department had worked around the clock on the details of the complex negotiation, never forgetting for a minute that lives were at stake, as we tragically learned. Just before I was due to speak at the Munich Security Council, we received dreadful news. Navalny was dead in his icy gulag, almost certainly murdered. I began my speech expressing deep sorrow for his death, saying it was another instance of Putin's brutality. Whatever story they tell, let us be clear. Russia is responsible. Navalny's widow, Yulia, had not been scheduled to speak at the conference, but she arrived, red-eyed and heartbroken, and took the podium after I spoke, giving a courageous call for resistance. The killing of Navalny made me even more motivated to achieve this prisoner swap, even though the chessboard had just been so violently overturned. Now, Joe was calling to say the pieces were finally moving into place. It looked like we'd soon be able to tell the families of Paul Whelan and Evan Gersevich that their ordeal was finally over. Now we know who ultimately took credit for Whelan coming home, and we know that Whelan decided to roll with a wannabe dictator and take a bunch of pictures holding a domestic beer that I thought that side of politics was boycotting, but you know. But that is where we will stop today. Like I said, if you missed any part of this, once we're done here, I will download and upload to YouTube. Parts 1 and 2 are already up, and tomorrow we will begin on page 70 with July 29th, 99 days to the election. Same time, same place. I will see you all tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. No, I'm sorry, 6:30 p.m. Central, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I'm sorry. But as always, each one teach one, each one reach one. And to all the trolls, thank you for boosting my algorithm. Dr. Seuss books are more adult in this thing. Whew, you all enjoy showing how meager the gray matter betwixt your ears is. I don't care if you stay. The live is over. There will not be a Teos chat tonight because he is still working. So we'll try to bring it to you at some point this weekend, I guess. But I will see you all tomorrow for the Taz Effect. Be good.